Welcome to the Ducks Unlimited podcast, the only podcast about all things waterfowl. From hunting insights to science-based discussions about ducks, geese, and issues affecting waterfowl and wetlands conservation in North America, we bring the resource to you. The DU Podcast with your hosts, Chris Jennings and Dr. Mike Brazier.
Today we have a very special show with a very special guest joining us all the way from Canada. He is a frequent guest of the show, a member of the Five Timers Club. Actually, this will be the sixth time he's on now. Dr. Scott Stevens with Ducks Unlimited Canada joining us here on the phone. And in studio with me, I have my co-host, Chris Jennings. Scott, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Good to be back, Mike.
And of course, Scott, the first question I have to ask is, did you get that jacket yet? I know last time we talked, you were asking for a jacket, and I said, just keep your eye on the mail.
Well, I did get a new jacket. I'm not sure it was shipped from you, but I have a new hunting jacket. So I guess it depends on how you want to frame that question.
Okay. Well, the Postal Service hasn't been in the news down here lately, so maybe we will just chalk it up to them and why you didn't get that jacket. But, just keep looking.
Yeah, I'll keep checking.
Scott, we wanted to have you on here today. It's early September. The hunting season has been open in Canada for a bit more than a week now, and I know you were able to get out and enjoy some of that resource. And so I'm going to kick it over to Chris to ask a couple of questions to you about your experiences last week, what you saw, and kind of how that may be shaping up the migration for folks down here. So, Chris, over to you.
Hey, Scott, I know everyone is probably jealous at your blue-winged teal exploits, and you've made it very well known the last few years. You've contributed some migration alerts of all of your early season travels chasing blue wings. But really, I just wanted you to provide a little update on how your hunting was last week, what you were seeing in your area, and what the habitat looks like.
Yeah, sure. So I make it sort of an annual tradition that I'll travel to southwestern Manitoba and sort of camp and spend a few days hunting early in the season. And I do target blue wings. From my perspective, this time of the year, they're really stocking on fat and getting ready to migrate. Some of them are down in you guys' parts of the world right now. Really, they're probably spread across the continent right now. But because they're really focused on getting that energy to go on migration, they're sort of the fattest and best eaten duck in the marsh right now from my perspective. So definitely a focus on blue wings. So I on Monday the 31st, I guess it was, I was down there south of Brandon, Manitoba, scouting in some areas that I typically hunt. It was definitely drier down there than it has been. I checked out a few of the Ducks Unlimited Canada properties that we're working on restorations on and will eventually revolve out. One of those that I stopped at, all the wetlands were dry on it this year. So that's just a function of environmental conditions. But I did find there were birds around in pretty good numbers, and we were able to have some success chasing a few of those early blue wings. One thing that is interesting is, I would say temperatures were seasonable when we started there in early September. And in the harvest, I find it's pretty common this time of the year to have lots of adult males. I think they're kind of on the front edge of the migration. They're ready to head out first because they have limited duties after the breeding season. So they're off to molt and, ready to go and migrate south. So much of the bag was adult males early in the week. And then actually the last time that I got out was on Monday of this week, Labor Day. And conditions had turned cooler, and I suspect that had pushed some of the birds out. And I definitely noticed that in my bag of 8 birds, there were only 2 adult males. So, sort of the ratio of adult males had definitely gone down. And I think that's probably a function of the cooler temps had sent many of those adult males that are ready for migration on their way. And we're kind of left with, juvenile birds and females that are probably still stocking up before they head south.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you, we're seeing that weather shift as well, even as far south as North Texas and even Central Texas, that, people who are used to 100-degree temperatures in September are getting a really nice cold front. And I was just curious as to how, what you're noticing as far as, other puddle ducks, in your area. Are you noticing a kind of an influx? Because I know, that cold front hit you guys obviously much, much more than it did down here.
I'll admit I didn't notice much of an influx of other ducks. I mean, there were plenty of other what this time of the year I call bigger ducks around. There are teal and there are bigger ducks. So there were plenty of mallards and pintails around that area that I was hunting. But I didn't notice a big movement in or anything. Now, cool weather for blue wings is probably a different thing than the kind of cool weather that pushes mallards and pintails and puts them on the move. So, I suspect there's some species differences there, but yeah, I'll admit I haven't seen a big movement of other ducks, but that's only kind of in the limited travels that I've had thus far. So doesn't mean it's not happening.
So, Scott, this is Mike here. What were the temperatures? What was the lowest the temperature got for you up there last week?
Yeah, I think when I was camping, I had a night where temps were down in the low 40s. So it was cool. I was in a sleeping bag and, was comfortable. But it's definitely more common at that time of the year. It's hot, it's in the 90s. And so it was definitely a change, in the overall temperatures. And then, let's see, I think it was Sunday, we had a big northwest wind, like sort of 40 mile an hour northwest wind. So I suspect birds that were ready to migrate, like probably some of those adult male blue wings, probably took advantage of that wind to ride that wind. I know actually when I drove back from western Manitoba, I had the same kind of westerly wind that was strong blowing, and man, I got awesome gas mileage driving to the east back with my kayak on top of my truck. So I can appreciate when ducks are catching some of that tailwind, what kind of advantage it provides too.
So with early cold fronts like that coming through, are you worried at this stage about those blue wings being pushed out of there pretty quick and being left with the larger ducks, or do you think the blue wings are still going to be around there for a couple more weeks?
Yeah, I do worry about that. I mean, as those cooler temperatures were hitting, I had a brief text exchange with my son who's off at college and is usually one of my partners on some of those trips. And I kind of lamented to him, it's like, ooh, it's cool. I may lose the blue wings earlier than normal here. And he kind of said, well, I guess you'll have to break down and shoot something else. And it's like, yeah, I might have to do that. So I think that's definitely happening. I think especially, as we think about blue wings, those adult males, they've been sort of free of any real duties during the breeding season since probably June or July at the latest. So they're molted. They've been putting on fat. So, I think that's why, I had fewer of those in my sample in the bag on Monday is, the ones that were ready, they had taken off and headed south. And it probably takes a little longer for the females and the juveniles just because, especially the young birds are still building fat because they were eggs in May or June. And the females went through the taxing part of laying eggs and raising ducklings. And so they're putting on fat too. So I think when you think about, the overall population of blue wing, you have those differences among those different age and sex cohorts that, probably adult males head out first. And that's what you guys will see lots of, in early teal seasons in the South. And then, maybe a little later, there'll be movement of some of these adult females and then juvenile birds coming south as they sort of hit that threshold that they're like, yep, we have enough to migrate, and then they'll be headed out.
Yeah, Scott, I'm just curious, when you're driving around Southwest Manitoba, and this is more of a personal curiosity, are you noticing a lack of other hunters due to, the Canadian border not being open? Or, did you notice like, oh, there's just not as many trucks or, anything like that? I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, it's a good question, Chris. It's a little bit different, the context here in Manitoba, because even if the border were open, the hunting season for U.S. folks does not open until the 24th of September. So, we have that time period here in Manitoba where it's just Canadian hunters. But I would say the area that I'm in, is like, I heard some other shots on one day, but I did not see other folks driving around. So, it's a pretty quiet landscape for harvest pressure in the fall. That changes a little bit as things get a little later and people get focused on Canada geese and mallards and those kind of things. But right now, one of the guys that I hunted with, he lives down in that area and he spends a lot of time hunting Canada geese. And, at this stage, it's early on and they're still in family groups. And, he was lamenting that, I kind of got 2 dozen here and 2 dozen there. And if I could put them all together in one field, it would make a hunt. But, that's kind of the stage that they're at too. So it was pretty quiet. But that wasn't a function of having the border closed right now. But that I would expect that will definitely be the case in some of the other provinces for sure.
Scott, you mentioned early on that it was a bit dry down there where you hunt. And just kind of curious here, when you have those kind of conditions, is that a good thing for your likely hunting success, or does it make it more challenging? That's probably a complicated answer there. The fewer wetlands you have, you're going to have fewer birds produced in that region. But by the same token, if you have fewer wetlands for the birds that are there to choose from, might make it easier to to concentrate the birds to your advantage from a hunting standpoint. How does that play out in your mind when you encounter those dry conditions?
Yeah, I think it's like you described. It's complicated, and I would say probably the best descriptor I can give is it makes it different. If we have lots of water, which when I started hunting in that area, probably in 2014, there was water everywhere, and wetlands were flooded out beyond the cattail margin. And so we hunted some of those wetlands that were scattered across the landscape. They really became kind of wetland complexes because they merged with other smaller wetlands in the surrounding area. And those were very good hunting. Now those are mostly dry and we're hunting, some flooded areas around a larger lake system that's down in that area. So it's different. I would say, when I'm thinking about blue wings, I'm always thinking about water depth, and, having 3 or 4 inches of water is what you're looking for. So, when wetland conditions fluctuate, finding those conditions where you do that changes across the landscape. But, where you're able to find that real shallow water, that's where you find the birds feeding. So yeah, it's kind of an exercise in, hey, where's the right water depth this year?
It's always interesting to find those right conditions. I have a couple of, maybe one other question, then we'll wrap it up. And this is a question more of a personal nature. Obviously, you and I have been friends for quite a while, and I see a lot of the posts that you make on social media. And here over the summer, you've been, and maybe for some time now, you've gotten into decoy carving and fashioning decoys of all different sorts. And I actually saw a picture where you had the famous headless blue-winged teal decoy that I made fun of on social media about, but representing a foraging blue-wing. I do realize that. But how did your decoys play out? How did they work out for you? Are you hunting over only decoys that you have made now, or do you still have some mass-produced decoys that you're hunting over?
Yeah, I still have mass-produced one, but yeah, working on decoys sort of became the pandemic pastime to sort of help maintain my sanity when you couldn't do a bunch of other stuff. So yeah, I made the headless decoy, which really looks natural in those shallow areas that I'm hunting for blue wings. So I put that out in most situations. I would tell you, I'll admit to sort of a little bit of an error here, and I also made some cork tip up duck butts that were fashioned to look like blue wing teal. And when I floated those for the first time, I didn't have the ballast in the keel right, and they didn't tip up. They laid down.
Look more like somebody had shot your decoy.
Yeah, so they look kind of like headless ones, only you could see the keel, sticking out the front. So when I got back from the trip out west, I got out some lead strap weights and I put those on the front of the keel, and it fixed it. So the next hunts that I have, the tip ups were tipped up. So I guess that's part of the learning process. So yeah, it's kind of fun to have a few of your own decoys out there that you fashioned and hunting over those. But yeah, I have a couple dozen sort of early season teal decoys that are kind of a mixture of Avery decoys, and I think there are some zinc ones mixed in there too, and they look pretty realistic. But yeah, I've mixed in my own creation there, and it's kind of fun to have those in the spread too.
What about blue-winged teal silhouettes? I know you've gotten into a lot of other silhouettes. Have you given that idea any thought? I want to see those.
I did. I made 11 blue-winged teal silhouettes. I think that was some of the first silhouettes I made in the pandemic. And I did have a situation on the opening day on September 1st where we had a nice little mud flat that was right where birds had been setting, and some of them were hauled up on that mud flat. So I put the silhouettes out on that first day, and we shot 3 limits of blue wings there over it. I can't say
sucked them right in.
Yeah, I can't say it was totally a result of the silhouettes. We were in a spot that they had been using, and but yeah,
you could say that.
I could make the case, I guess, but yeah.
Sure. Now, did you get that idea from some that you saw elsewhere, or was that just a totally Scott Stevens idea?
Yeah, that was my own. I've not seen teal silhouettes, and I know when I made them, I sort of joked on social media saying, "Who needs those? Nobody needs those, right?" But I had definitely seen those situations where you have mud flats and you have blue wings in there, and you see them hauled out on those mud flats. So I thought, well, having a few of those would be kind of cool, and so it was a little bit of a creative challenge for me. Can I make those? Can I paint them to make them look realistic? So. Yep, I did up a few of those, and have only had them out the once. The other situations where I've hunted, I didn't have the mud flat situation. But yeah, I guess as you become a more experienced hunter, you're always kind of looking for the right situation and the gear to fit the different situations you encounter. So who knows how often I'll use those, but it was kind of fun to put them together, and I did find the one situation where they looked very natural and looked like what the birds were doing. So that's usually what I'm trying to mimic out there as I set up my spreads.
Well, you may have started something. Next thing you know, they'll be all across the landscape this time of year. So
yeah, that's right.
I think that's all the questions I have. Chris, do you have any final questions for Scott?
I don't. I appreciate you joining us, Scott, and jealous that you're up there chasing ducks already. We're still sweating it out down here for sure.
Appreciate the chance to be on. I hope to get out and maybe sample a few more blue wings before they head your way. So we'll see how that goes.
Yep. Thanks, Scott. And we'll be sure to catch up with you maybe next month once you've been chasing some of the bigger ducks and get a handle on what those look like and how your success has gone there. So look forward to catching up with you later on.
Okay. Sounds good.
Special thanks to our guest on today's show, Dr. Scott Stevens with Ducks Unlimited Canada. Appreciate his insight on early hunting season in Canada and hearing some of his experiences up there afield. Also thank my co-host here, Chris Jennings, for joining me on this podcast. Thank our producer, Clay Baird, for the great work he does on all aspects of this podcast. And to you, the listener, we thank you for joining us here. Thank you for supporting the podcast. And thank you for your commitment to wetlands and waterfowl conservation.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the DU Podcast. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and visit www.ducks.org/DU Podcast for resources based on today's topics, as well as access to more episodes. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of Ducks Unlimited. Until next time, stay tuned to the Ducks.